Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. I'm Preacher Miles, host of the SOS, the Shout Out Show. Hope that you are having a fabulous Wednesday. Before we get started, I want to make sure we give some shout outs. I don't want to say sick and shut in, just some people that need that dua, and we're praying for them to receive some shifa. I want to give a shout out to Sister Ree's young warrior. Brother Juwan had some health issues. He's home from the hospital. Alhamdulillah, we appreciate that. Big shout out, bundles of love to our dear sister and supporter of the show, Miss Eleanor Davis. Hope that you're feeling better. You know, it's interesting when you start talking about health and understanding that people are in the process. We don't know where they are in the process of their health, whether it's good, bad, anything in between. But I think it's really vital that we kind of take out this whole aspect of guesswork. And when people are sick, we just need to approach them and address them as being sick. And we want for them to have better health, however that is, whether it's medicine, whether it's mental health, spiritual health, financial health. We're pulling for people to find better versions of themselves than they did yesterday. And that very much leads us to our topic today. We're not going to post it just yet, but our topic today has to do with, I want to say, the lay of the land and the concepts. And we talked about it last week with Brother Sakai Sandiford. I was talking about it off air with Sister Satana, just this whole idea of understanding what the environment is. I tend oftentimes, brothers and sisters, I look on the phone and I have something from Apple. And what it is, it's a news feed. That's it right there. You see that big N right there? What that is it's a news feed, and it's an aggregate of information. And if you're not careful, and of course, I've been victim to this. If you're not careful, sometimes you can, believe me, brothers and sisters, you can get caught up in it. It could be sports, it could be business, it could be finance, it could be entertainment. Just reading these, aggregated columns of information over and over and over and over and over again. What I found is that we have become a culture that is hell bent, and has been hell bent and trained at this point in time that we are a society that lends itself to trending. Our topic today is pay attention, life is trending. Because, oddly enough, we've always heard, life imitates art imitates life, and things like that. But life is imitating trending. And what I mean by that is some topics are hot and then they're not. I love this little thing that they put on, because what happens, they'll give you the top 5 things. When you go to Netflix, they'll give you the top 5 comedies that are trending, on the top 5 documentaries and things like that. And we've grown into a society that looks at those and places importance on them. That the idea that something is printed to us in categorical, I want to say, importance to somebody, it's not to us. But we want to understand what's number one, what's number two, and what's number three, and what's number four, and what's number five, because we believe that these numbers have meaning that somehow should order how we are looking at this stuff. Like, I got to look at number 1 or 2 or 3, but not number 5. These are the things that I say reflect that life is trending, but also it now has broader implications. It now has broader implications in our elections, broader implications in education, broader implications in so many things. We're going to talk about that here on the Shout Out Show. So I want everybody to know before we get started that this is no knock against anybody. That the things I'm going to talk about today may seem disconnected, but if I'm blessed, inshallah, I'll be able to connect them. Because in many regards, we have moved into this space of trending. The Muslim community is think about this. The Muslim community, our whole base, pretty much in terms of nonprofit and charity, is built upon what's trending in the nonprofit charity area. What are people paying for? This is facts. What are people paying for? We pay thousands of dollars for algorithms, thousands of dollars for data. We want to know who's giving, how can we get them going. This is, mind-boggling, because in the last 15, 20 years, this has become, for lack of a better word, the trend. So life is trending. We're going to be talking about it here on the Shout Out Show. Don't you move. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll be right back here on the Shout Out Show. Let's roll. Okay, welcome back to our show. Our topic today is pay attention, life is trending. Let me explain to you guys how trending works from an entertainment space. When a movie comes out, if the movie is extremely popular, people say, I want to make a movie like that that's not like that. What does it mean? I want to make a movie that's categorically in that space, but it can't be that movie. I want to make a near movie, if you will. When I say a near movie, a near TV show, it means that a trend has been established, and before the trend gets cold, people want to cash in. So a movie that makes $200 million, someone would say, I can't make a movie that's going to make $200 million, but if I can get $100 million, I'll follow that trend. This has been the thing that's happened because we now deal with life cycles, news cycles, political cycles that find us in this spin. I'm a comedian, been one for a long time, but I was a teacher before I was a professional comedian, and while I was a professional comedian, I was a teacher. And I was reading something, and it wasn't Reddit or something, but they had 33 stories of why teachers left the teaching profession. 33 stories. And if you put it on the trend for why teachers left position, you can say one was pay, two was abuse from students and administrators, three was abuse from parents, and four was the fact that it didn't pay enough. And as I read all 33 stories, they all follow one of these four trends that I mentioned here. Why is that important? Because you have a generational shortage of people going into the teaching profession. And what are they looking at? Things that I happen to pick up on the phone, 33 stories about why people left the teaching profession. You're not finding trends about why people go into the teaching profession. Why? Because it's not a trend. If it was a trend, it'd be like, well, teaching is great. This is why you teach. And you have all these things out here that would actively promote going into the teacher position. I have not been in the classroom in years. You know what I get on my phone? Hey, Mr. Moss, we know you taught special ed. We're wondering if you're still, look, I'm 180 years old. I can't go with them kids. They're going to kill me. I'm going to kill them. I can't go in there with those kids. But why? People say, why would they reach out to you? Because they know in special ed that because we have specialized skills, they know the trend with people in special ed is that we don't go into regular education. We don't migrate into regular education. Here's yet another trend because our skills are locked. Now I want to clear the slate on that and get to the part about what is a trend. A trend is an anomaly, if you will, meaning that we don't necessarily develop it, but we follow it. You know, someone tried to tell me on a large argument about religion. We got to talking about Islam, and he said, well, you know, Islam is a trend. This was many years ago. And I said, explain to me how it's a trend. He said, well, it's an anomaly. You didn't develop it, but you follow it. I said, no, there's a little bit more to that. I said, there's much more sophisticated levels. And what I was telling him, I was like, well, the thing about it not being a trend is it has to do with the fact that religion is not compulsory. Now, whether you're convert, revert, born in religion, it's not compulsory. It requires a subset of thinking, a subset of skills to really engage in religion. Whether you do it well, whether you do it poorly, it is not a trend. What it is engagement. And we have to separate a trend from engagement. Because more and more people, this becomes life. I'm sitting around the house today with no water. By the way, shout out to WSSC Water. They came and the neighbor had a water break at 4 in the morning. We had no water. I'm voodooing with bottled water, whatever. And shout out to Deer Park Water because they make nice bottles of water. But here's my point. It was funny because there's no water. I turned on the TV and I'm watching CNN. My mom and I having breakfast. And I'm going to tell you how temporary that a trend could be. Watching CNN and one of the lead stories on CNN, because it was it was a very, very slow news day. They were talking about a congressional hearing on UFOs. I see Satana laughing. This was one of the lead stories today. A congressional hearing on UFOs, and they had changed the name of UFOs to unidentified anomaly sightings. So it's no longer UFOs, unidentified anomaly sightings. And the whole thing was one group of politicians is saying that the government's not telling us everything about these UFOs, who are now UFSs, UAS, not UFOs, but UAS. And it was kind of bothering. Like, why is this even on TV? Why wasn't it on TV? Let me tell you why. Because if you show it 2-3 times, it has the opportunity to trend. This is how funny it is. That crazy conversation about congressional hearing on UFOs gets interrupted. A breaking news story that Kevin Spacey was found innocent on 9 counts of sexual assault over in the UK. Slow news day. As my grandfather used to say, this don't put no butter on my toast, boy. It didn't put any butter on the toast. But the fact of the matter is, you have things that are trying to get out there. Politics these days is not so much about the presentation of facts. It's the presentation of facts that trend. I think it was 2021. We were all sitting around. I was here at my mother's house, and it was right before the inauguration. They were going to ratify the votes. We did a show called Smells Like a Coup to Me. Now, the reason is the voice is down. Oh, I can't. Hold on a minute. Oh yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that. Um, I should have done this at the beginning. I'm gonna do that, Satana. So let me come back after the break because I do not want to forget that. Actually, two things I want to mention. But this whole idea now that we are a commercialization of trends now. That people will buy into what they think people like based upon numbers, SKUs. There are a number, if you will, of indicators that people go with. Only time it's not really accurate when it comes to the financial markets. We don't know when the market's going up or it's going down. We guess. But in that space, particularly with the introduction of AI, we now have the probability to be able to say, while we're not 100% sure, we think that this could be the. If you think about it, 2 years ago, AI in this regard, in terms of Chat GPT, was not trending. It was this idea that it could happen, da da da. But if you look at the aggregate in terms of computer technology, management information systems, this was bound to happen. We do movies about computers taking over. What you got? Terminator 1 through 8, 1 through 15. It is all about the leveling up of computer over the human condition and human thinking. That being said, it behooves us, if you think about this, to look at, and I want to frame this correctly. Start looking at the value of trending. What are the dangers of trending? Now, before I go any further, I want to shout out my shout out family. Let's go ahead and get them in here, Sister Tana. Look at these good looking men, blessed by Allah. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate you. All right. And the middle guy looks good too. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Sister Ree, how you doing? Let us know how Brother Jawad is doing. We shouted him out during the show. Glad that you're back from Michigan. Peace and blessings to you and your King Derek. We appreciate you coming on the show as always. But let us know how brothers is doing. What you sent me, I was concerned. We can talk about that later. But thank you for at least letting me know. Next up, my main man, Altar Rashid, better known as Mr. 6 o'clock, straight up, straight down, all the way from Toronto, Canada. Wa alaikum assalam, rahmatullahi barakatuh, my dear brother. Good to see you on the spot. Are you having problems getting on the spot? Let me know, because I've been having some people saying they came on, they tried to get on, some problems with Facebook. Just let me know. But let me just cut to the chase, man. Glad to see you on the show. We appreciate you, man. Peace and blessings to you and your family. Next up, we got Sister Satana. Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good to see you in the spot. Working the ones and twos on the back end of the show. Appreciate you as always. Next up, I'm gonna give some shout outs. I want to give a shout out to my little brother JT, Johnny L. Thomas, working diligently. So sometimes he's not gonna be on the show. He gotta make that bag. We got a nephew. I got a nephew going to Yale. We all out here. So I'm about to leave here and go to my job cleaning windshields at the bottom of the expressway. So shout out to JT. Also shout out to my main man Eric Carter. Hope you're doing well. He might come back here on the show. Shout out to Sister Chaudhry, Sister Rabia over in the UK, always tuning in. And I also want to make sure I give a shout out to my main man Bilal, his sister, his queen, Sisters Sonia Dalton, Salahuddin. We hope that you guys are doing right. He sent me a really good picture from last week. He said, look at this cat watching. It was funny. It was a picture of his cat watching the shout out show. It was actually pretty cool. It was pretty funny. So I appreciate that. Let me give this, and I will get back to the subject. I talk about pay attention. Life is trending. We had two life events that I was a part of this weekend. Want to give a shout out to Imam Qasim Khan and Sister Hussaina Khan down in Houston, Texas. They are the inspiration and the muscle behind Masjid Al Tawheed in Fifth Ward, Houston. I've seen them grow that space from literally nothing. It was a church. They turned it into a masjid. They turned it into a foundation in uh, one of the toughest sections of Houston proper, bringing light to a place that's been dim for a long time. They celebrated their 50th. Hear me now. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. I got to be there and host it. It was amazing. Nothing short of a brilliant celebration of just commitment. And I say this because their commitment has been wrapped up in this whole thing that we call Islam. I mean, they have lived that space going back to when Imam Qasim was in the Nation of Islam, and then he was with WD, and then he's with the group he's with right now. It's just amazing to see that working ethic. And right beside him is his wife, not behind him, but right beside him is his wife, and at sometimes in front of him, leading the charge to make people's lives better, to somehow access them to a better understanding of how life could be. Every time I go there, I would say in a month they may have 4 or 5 new shahadas because they're presenting something new and it's beautiful. So shout out to Imam Qasim and his wife, Sister Hussaina. They are on there. Excuse me. I believe they went to Egypt to celebrate their 50. So alhamdulillah for that. Now, Sister Satana has reminded me, I'm going to shout out my big brother Rick Slafford. We had a event in Washington, D.C., well, in Virginia, but the DMV area. My nephew, Kayvon Slafford, got married to Sister Fallon. It was an amazing, I do have some pictures that we'll show, but it was amazing to just see someone who is a baby, and now he's married. And I have to say, shout out to the Golden Girls, which would be my mom and my Aunt Maxine, who I want to say that they thugged it out and got in the car, or hour drive out, hour drive back. I mean, they were there and they were present for my brother Rick and his family. And I just want to shout out, in fact, everybody that came to that wedding was amazing. And many happy years to Kayvon and Sister Fallon. And I look for some babies coming out of that situation. And I'm glad that you guys got together. They're young too. You know, they're young. You know, in the DC area, people ain't getting married on average to like 32. Um, they've been together 5 years, so they know what they wanted to do. So kudos to you. So listen, we're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna come back and we're gonna continue this whole idea about paying attention. Life is trending here on the Shout Out Show. We'll be right back. Yeah, so my first, I guess, introduction to convenient urgent care, they were providing masks and supplies for people who didn't have supplies during COVID. And I went to pick them up and was going to take them around to some of the local areas. And I ran into a brother named Ijaz Saeed. And as I began to talk to Ijaz, it was very, very clear that this brother had a vision for community service. Oftentimes, when you have urgent cares in a situation that they're not necessarily doing a prevention or education. He came up with the term "a home of the smart patient," and I understand what that means. It means that people really want to be in tune about their health, but at the same time, they also want to be in tune about the people who are providing health. This is a very organic relationship. And little did I know, a year or so later, I would actually have to call on their services when I was in dealing with some physical trauma, if you will. And I have to say, they held my hand and they took me through the process. The offerings of telehealth, the offerings of being able to walk in consistent. I was in pretty bad shape, but they treated me like I was the president of the United States, not that one, Obama. Okay, I'm joking. But what I want to say is the professionalism, the dedication, the care, compassion, and the consistency, all the things I just named, makes convenient urgent care the space you want to go to. 3 locations in the Houston area: Cypress, Pasadena, and Parker Road in Houston. But I want to say the overall conceptual understanding of convenient urgent care is that they care for their patients, even when the patients don't know how to care for themselves. Check them out. All right. Thank you so much. Shout out to Convenient Urgent Care, my main man, Ijaz Saeed. Get better, brother. Feel better. So listen, I've been talking about this whole idea of pay attention, life is trending. One of the downsides of trending, and this is me being a 56-year-old black man, one of the downsides of trending is that when you don't actively investigate what these options are or what people are presenting to you in terms of information, diversity, and the like, creativity, is that you do fall into a pattern or a rut, if you will, whereby you don't necessarily investigate. Let me say it again. You don't necessarily investigate. The presentations of things that make life easier for you, whether it be the internet, smartphones, apps, merely readjust your priorities in terms of the business that you're trying to get done. And we talked about social media and all of that. No need to dredge that up. But I think the thing that has always bothered me about trending, if you will, and it's not a personal thing, I just believe that it leaves creativity and growth out of a process for a ton of people. See, one person wants to lead the trend and they want everybody else to follow. And usually that situation, outside of, I want to say, religious narrative, that you have one person they follow, that person is leading them to something that's bigger than themselves. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people have narratives, people have agendas for why they lead you. And if you're willing to be led and not be questioned, then they develop something that's extremely dangerous and something that's very pervasive right now in our society. The thing that's very pervasive when you get into trending, if you will, where we are just going with the flow. We're not questioning where we're going. We're not even calling to account our own creativity. We're not framing our accountability in situations. The dangerous thing that's happening these days, and I want everyone to make note of it, is we have become a society that accepts, if you will, that accepts and promotes complacency. We accept and we promote complacency. I said, well, preach, what are you talking about? Creating an environment that allows for complacency means that you have people who build aspects of entitlement into society who they can't do the work. Everyone watching this show has probably run into somebody who overestimates what they can really do in a situation. As they say, you oversold and underperformed. Well, we're a society of people who oversell and underperform. And it happens so much that the underperformance becomes the norm. Whether you're talking about riots, rebellions, wars, things like that. If you look at the Ukraine war, what is the Ukraine war? These are not men getting together fighting in a traditional way. It's drones, it's things like that. And people have to sit back and go, we're winning. And they don't even know what they're winning, where they're winning, what kind of territory. We literally live, and maybe somebody give me some help with this one, but we literally live in a society whereby the people who want to say that they're keeping score, they can't count. Altaf, can you put Altaf's comment up briefly, Sister Tana? He said something is what's up with Facebook Live. It isn't registering the comments in live chat. Okay, cool. I just want to make sure. But my point is, even with Facebook, even with YouTube, we live a life of algorithms. There was a film that was put out, and this happens all the time. I won't say the brother's name. Satana probably knows. I get a text from this gentleman, and the text is about this call to action for a film called The Innocent Prophet. And in it, they said that it was disrespectful to the prophet's daughter, da 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 da. I go to find out what they're talking about. I can't even find the film. The whole idea was that Facebook was going to put it on there and Facebook was going to take it down and da da da. And we have all these arguments. I can't even find the film. Yet we invest all this energy and all this emotion into this thing. Why? You've just helped a film that wasn't positive by making it trend. The film wasn't even released this year. It was released a couple years ago, some time ago. It was being re-released. And now here we are in this space trying to make it bigger. Inadvertently making it bigger. And why? Because we're not doing the homework. See, and the Muslim community is interesting because we do have these very big pockets of complacency. And the dangerous part of it is the complacency is coupled with the fact that we have people who are resistant. You can't be both. You can't be complacent and resistant. Just be resistant, because now you've got to give me an idea of why. Complacency is, I'm just going to sit back and hopefully maybe people can be resistant for me. And I'm going to introduce this video in a minute. Thank you, Santana. I'm going to introduce this video in a minute. And it really goes to the hub. They have something called complacency something syndrome. They got a lot of syndromes, you know that. But it's just the fact that people choose, if you will, to engage a certain level of productivity in a situation, but then they don't engage the other part of it. Per se, if I'm a supervisor, Satana's a supervisor, and we have motivated employees, 5 motivated employees, and we have 5 unmotivated employees. We engage and put all our time into the 5 motivated employees, but then we look at the unmotivated employees and we're upset because they're not producing. But we're not empowering them. We're not informing them. We're not giving them pathways to increase that. But we expect for them somehow to be on par with the ones who are producing, the ones who are engaged. And this is where we are right now. We have one quadrant of society that's extremely engaged and one side of the population that's extremely not engaged, but they're being served, if you will. They're being served by a capacity that says it's okay to not be engaged and still have expectations of everybody else. I want to win like the people are engaged. If I'm a runner and I've trained for a marathon, and I do that, and a person has not trained for a marathon, they want the benefits of going a half marathon, 13.3 miles or 26.6 miles. I want the benefits, but you haven't engaged. And then furthermore, it creates the illusion, if you will, in many cases. People are deceived into thinking that they're much greater than they actually are. That you're much smarter than you actually are, that you're much more pious than you actually are, that you're much more religious than you actually are, that you're a great dad or a great mom, and all these things. And you're fooling yourself. And the worst part about it, the market for fooling yourself is exponential as opposed to the market for keeping it real. Watch this video and I'll be right back.
Are you as good at things as you think you are? How good are you at managing money? What about reading people's emotions? How healthy are you compared to other people you know? Are you better than average at grammar? Knowing how competent we are and how our skills stack up against other people's is more than a self-esteem boost. It helps us figure out when we can forge ahead on our own decisions and instincts and when we need instead to seek out advice. But psychological research suggests that we're not very good at evaluating ourselves accurately. In fact, we frequently overestimate our own abilities. Researchers have a name for this phenomenon: the Dunning-Kruger effect. This effect explains why more than 100 studies have shown that people display illusory superiority. We judge ourselves as better than others to a degree that violates the laws of math. When software engineers at 2 companies were asked to rate their performance, 32% of the engineers at one company and 42% at the other put themselves in the top 5%. In another study, 88% of American drivers described themselves as having above-average driving skills. These aren't isolated findings. On average, people tend to rate themselves better than most in disciplines ranging from health, leadership skills, ethics, and beyond. What's particularly interesting is that those with the least ability are often the most likely to overrate their skills to the greatest extent. People measurably poor at logical reasoning, grammar, financial knowledge, math, emotional intelligence, running medical lab tests, and chess all tend to rate their expertise almost as favorably as actual experts do. So who's most vulnerable to this delusion? Sadly, all of us, because we all have pockets of incompetence we don't recognize. But why? When psychologists Dunning and Kruger first described the effect in 1999, they argued that people lacking knowledge and skill in particular areas suffer a double curse. First, they make mistakes and reach poor decisions. But second, those same knowledge gaps also prevent them from catching their errors. In other words, poor performers lack the very expertise needed to recognize how badly they're doing. For example, when the researchers studied participants in a college debate tournament, the bottom 25% of teams in preliminary rounds lost nearly 4 out of every 5 matches. But they thought they were winning almost 60%. Without a strong grasp of the rules of debate, the students simply couldn't recognize when or how often their arguments broke down. The Dunning-Kruger effect isn't a question of ego blinding us to our weaknesses. People usually do admit their deficits once they can spot them. In one study, students who had initially done badly on a logic quiz and then took a mini course on logic were quite willing to label their original performances as awful. That may be why people with a moderate amount of experience or expertise often have less confidence in their abilities. They know enough to know that there's a lot they don't know. Meanwhile, experts tend to be aware of just how knowledgeable they are, but they often make a different mistake. They assume that everyone else is knowledgeable too. The result is that people, whether they're inept or highly skilled, are often caught in a bubble of inaccurate self-perception. When they're unskilled, they can't see their own faults. When they're exceptionally competent, they don't perceive how unusual their abilities are. So if the Dunning-Kruger effect is invisible to those experiencing it, what can you do to find out how good you actually are at various things? First, ask for feedback from other people and consider it, even if it's hard to hear. Second, and more important, keep learning. The more knowledgeable we become, the less likely we are to have invisible holes in our competence. Perhaps it all boils down to that old proverb: when arguing with a fool, first make sure the other person isn't doing the same thing. Did you enjoy this lesson? If so, please consider supporting our non-profit.
All right. Well, shout out to that video. Um, because even me talking about trending, it's really interesting that in that video they talked about the people who set the trends. That sometimes they're not aware of how great an idea is, how exceptional an idea is, or even how controversial an idea is. And we talk about the almost like a Venn diagram of not being able to recognize sometimes how bad we are at something, or sometimes how good we are at something. And that space there can lead to, yes, complacency. We're not asking the questions, the difficult questions. One of the things about a trend is a trend requires a certain blind willfulness that we need the person who's leading us to be correct because it validates our decision. Years ago, they did this study, and I might have brought this up, so I apologize if I'm being redundant. They did this study and they talked about the Holocaust. And they talked about the wherewithal, if you will, to understand how the Nazis grew trending. And it was really interesting in terms of, because we sit back and go, this is horrible. How can people do that? It doesn't take that much. And they didn't have mass media. It's a very closed thing back then. They didn't have apps or internet. But what they did was frame trends. Look at some of the specific trends they did. They framed trends in terms of the clothing. They framed trends in terms of an aspect of Aryan nation. They trained trends in terms of the language, the religion, that it was Catholicism over Judaism. They trained it in terms of the dress, the brown shirts, the SS, establishing, if you will, different hierarchies for the trend, if you will. If you look at it, you say, well, how did it, I used to say, well, why did they talk about the Aryan nation? Hitler looked like a troll. He was okay because he was in that space that framed the trend. And he grew it. He mastered it. And when he turned it around, he was able to produce content. And he was able to produce, I want to say, a model that people could follow, where they didn't necessarily ask questions. And then, and I even think in this regard, and anybody can jump in, I really think in this regard, there is something about the negativity of failing up. And when I say the negativity of failing up, I mean that as a school teacher, and you probably heard this, as a school teacher, we had kids that we struggled with. We wanted them to learn. We wanted to be able to read at a certain grade level. We wanted to be able to do math at a certain grade level. We were dealing with testing, all that type of stuff. And we would have children that had legitimately failed. And this was also something from the teachers who talk about 33 stories of teachers who left teaching and didn't return. It's that the evaluations weren't accepted. I had a student, I never forget it, a young kid named Terrence. I had a student named Terrence who did nothing all year. He showed up. He was disruptive. Some days he was good. Some days he wasn't. But Terrence didn't do anything all year. And it was my first year teaching. And his scores were so bad from when he showed up, and his test was so bad because he's in fifth grade, you have to give a grade. And when I gave a grade to Terrence, it was an F. He earned the F. And I remember having to sit in a conference with Terrence and the administrator and his mother, whom I told he was failing every quarter. Terrence is not, and I had to listen to the administrator talk to me about how somehow my judgment was impaired because he was a good young man and he didn't have these breaks, and I was not being open and I was not being considerate of his situation. And I'm like, I've been telling you. You see what I'm saying? And it became frustrating. So listen, we're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna be right back. Don't you move. We're gonna keep talking about this. Oh, I did. Pay attention. Life is trending. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. I'm comedian Preacher Moss. I hope you're having a blessed Ramadan. Listen, I just want to take a couple of minutes of your time to talk about Olive Branch Muslim Family Services. You know, Olive Branch Muslim Family Services represents a lot in the city of Houston. You have a lot of relief organizations throughout the country, throughout the state, but I have to say Olive Branch Muslim Family Services is one for the home team of the city of Houston. Listen, let me tell you about myself. I've always lived this idea that I'm always going to have more blessings than I'm going to have problems. And in that space, I've been able to understand that the blessings sometimes mean I can be a blessing in somebody else's life, much the same with Olive Branch Muslim Family Services. Years ago, maybe 2 years ago, we had a video and it asked the question, the profound question, imagine if it wasn't an olive branch. Not so much the organization, but the absence of compassion and mercy. Imagine if there wasn't an olive branch. Not so much a question, but a reminder of a prophetic tradition that all of our prophets who have come came to advocate for the poor and uplift the suffering. Imagine if there wasn't an olive branch. Thinking about that. OBMFS. I changed the letters from Olive Branch Muslim Family Services and dug a little deeper, thinking about that prophetic tradition. So Olive Branch Muslim Family Services is really Olive Branch's mission is family success. We need your help. While you're writing out that check, brothers and sisters, think about that. What's a world without compassion? What's good music without good instruments? What's a president that's distrustful and not honest? Okay, let me get back focused. In any event, imagine if there wasn't an olive branch. Let me remind you.
We just need help.
Imagine if there wasn't an olive branch. Muslim Family Services at your command. The people who help people have to say, we need your donations, don't delay. We all have struggles from time to time, but leaders dedicated is what you find. Before another person sheds a tear, support Olive Branch, you don't have to fear. Olive Branch Muslim Family Services. Action you can see, compassion you can feel. Sing it with me. Ooh. Ooh. All right, we're back. Before we went to the break, I was talking about a student who I had to face along with administrators and his parents because I had essentially told the mother he had failed. And I was in an office with the principal, the administrator, the VP, and a parent. And I was brought into the room after they had a conversation. And the conversation was essentially that we're going to talk to Mr. Moss, and Terrence, the young student, will pass. They were trying to give him a social promotion. But here's the deal. You can only give so many social promotions in a school year, just so you guys know. And they had already chosen one of the social promotions in my class. Terrence was not one of them. He was going to wind up being held back. And I sat here going, for the whole school year, every piece of documentation, I'm talking about home visits, speaking to Terrence, psychologist, social worker, reading aid. All of us had come to the conclusion that Terrence had made up his mind that he did not want to learn. That whatever the process, the educational process that was being offered to him, he didn't want any part of it. And it became a thing at the end of the year when kids started talking about going out of school. Then he became very much invested in where am I going to go to school? However, I don't believe I need to go through the educational process to move on to the next grade level. Terrence was indicative of what we see now. The trend then is the same trend now, but the trend then was social promotion. And because there were so many social promotions in the city of Milwaukee, Milwaukee Public Schools, that there were kids who banked their whole year on the idea that whatever goes down, I can't get an F. I can't be held back because they have this thing called social promotion. Well, let me tell you something, brothers and sisters. I failed Terrence. I failed Terrence in a way that, one, not just his grade, but I failed Terrence to I failed Terrence because I didn't really tell him, impart it to him, that this system that they're trying to put you in, they don't even have room for you right now. There's so many social promotions, you won't fit up under the umbrella. So you might as well kick in and learn. Damn it, Terrence, get a D and I'll pass you. And that didn't happen. Now, fast forward some years later, I was in Milwaukee doing a comedy show. Having a good set, having a good time. A young man walks up to me. Hey, do you remember me? And I looked in the face. I said, man, you look really familiar. He said, I'm Terrence. I said, Terrence. And I won't say his last name, but I said, Terrence, what's going on? What did Terrence tell me? He said, man, you know what? And this is Terrence at 20 going, you know what? You didn't give me a social promotion. But he goes, what? The other teachers gave me a social promotion for 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. And I said, how did that work out for you? You know what Terrence said? Man, I just got out last week. I just got out last week. And this is the danger, brothers and sisters, because we have a society that does it. If you want to understand how complacency works, look at January 6th. Look at the riot at the Capitol. That is not people attacking the Capitol because they're angry. That is people acting out of space that they were in many, I want to say in many cases, extremely complacent. And someone gave them a call to action. And that call to action did not require that they look at the logic, that's inclusive of why would you go to the Capitol in the first place. That the Stop the Steal movement, we're going to stop the steal. What the hell does Stop the Steal move? What does that mean? Stop the Steal was a slogan from 2016. Nobody does homework anymore. And in the larger scope, and I'm going to say this, but in the larger scope, it serves, brothers and sisters, to erase achievement, erase history, erase contribution. People are boycotting right now. Don't even go to the state of Florida. They're boycotting. Don't go to the state of Florida. Why? Because the governor of Florida has figured out a way to eliminate Black achievement and still call it Black history. Now, what's the complacency piece here? I'm going to tell you what. Because there are a lot of people, including me at times, that believe that this system is going to correct itself and do the right thing. I'm not in that space anymore. But you can't say that white supremacy is going to do the right thing. White supremacy is built explicitly on complacency. That's why they call it white. It should be called white complacency. That the people who are doing these things, like your Jim Crow and your segregation, have admittedly sat by and looked at Black achievement and got upset when Black achievement passed them by. When Native Americans passed them by. When the Latinos passed them by. Because when you pass by somebody who's complacent, they now become anxiety riddled. They are now scared. As long as you're in the back seat, or you're behind them, or you're beneath them in their estimation, and that's a different kind of complacency, then they're happy. The video that you just saw is amazing. We should show it again. That video is amazing. Why? Because it encapsulates so much of what we're talking about. You know, because when you're complacent, you become you have a great efficacy to lie to yourself as well as be lied to by the people around you. One movie I would encourage everybody to see. I know we got to wrap up. I'm gonna stay on track here, Sister Donna. There's a movie called Rosewood. Now, Rosewood is a true story. It stars Ving Rhames and John Voight and Don Cheadle. But Rosewood was a situation where you had a town in southern Florida that was segregated. I don't know southern Florida, but a town in Florida that was segregated. It had two communities. The black community was called Rosewood. The white community was called Sumner. Now, as long as the balance was good and Sumner could see themselves in some way as superior to Rosewood, which is the fact that it doesn't matter what we do. If we do everything, we do nothing, we're going to be superior to Rosewood. As long as that perception was correct, they were good. The tipping point in the film, if you ever want to watch it, is a white woman has an affair with a white man. She doesn't want her husband to find out after she gets beat up by the man who she's having an affair with. She blames it on a black person. And that becomes the call to action for everybody in Sumner to we're looking for this black person. All they had was he was black. All they had was he was a man. That's a pretty broad conversation, eh? But it gives people this is why this is dangerous. Because when they rise up, brothers and sisters, from all these years of complacency, they are nothing but destructive. There's nothing conceptually creative that you can tie into, that you can make a case for. They don't do it. And I think the thing that's really, really interesting is we have to be careful because that's exactly what we're dealing with. So all the assaults on black studies and affirmative action, even abortion, is the rise of a people who have been complacent. And the powers that be give them a carrot, if you will. They give them a carrot to rise up as if they've been informed, to rise up, just like Terrence. Like Terrence, you want to pass, but he didn't really embrace your education. And shout out to Terrence, because you know what? He was a good kid. And to a man, he said, you know what? I was mad at you for a lot of years, but he said, you know what? You did the right thing. I'm saying I don't get that all the time. So shout out to Terrence. But, and I'm going to get to the wrap here. We should bring Sister Satana. Sister Satana, you want to come in? You coming in? She said, no, she's not coming in. Okay. But let me get to the wrap. Because here's the deal. Even when I do the shout out show, I try to be aware. So when I talk about things, I'm not talking about them on a wing and a prayer. These are things we try to think about because, fortunately, I'm blessed to be around an ecosystem or an environment of people who are like-minded or better. So when I deal with people, whether it be Sister Tana, I identify in these people something that they are superior in, something that will cause me to follow them and learn, something that's going to inspire me to be better. That's not happening with complacency. It's simply a call to action. It's not a push to be better. It's a push without any strings of compassion, mercy. It's not a push to be better. It's a push to be ballistic. Because the moment you realize that you ain't all that and the lights are on you, what else you going to do? You're going to burn the house down. And we have a situation and we look at these trends. Look at the trends out. I'm going to close on this and then we can go. On this thing right here, they have trends. Right here. Here are the trends, the things that are trending. Oh, here we go. Let me give you the top 5 trends. Trending stories. Number 1, U.S. Embassy in Dublin warns visitors to Ireland to avoid walking alone. Number 2, trending. Wife continues to care for husband after traumatic brain injury, and so does her new husband. 3, analysis. Why car dealers are losing their shine. And 4, If you can see an invasive hammerhead worm, don't cut it in half. Here's how to kill them. That's what's trending. So listen, I'm going to wrap. I'm just going to say, everybody, listen, maintain, promote, grow, and develop your own individuality. Ask questions. The danger to a trend is a critical thinker. So I would implore all of us, including myself, to be critical thinkers in these things. We are not robots. We are not to be led by the hand to places we don't want to go and places we don't understand and deal with things that we don't deal with. We are individuals. In a religious scope, the prophetic narrative says that we are not folks who are brash to following trends. That's not who we are. So listen, that's a shout out show today. God bless you. Shout out to my nephew Kayvon and his wife Fallon. Shout out to Jawad. Shout out to Imam Qasim Khan and Sister Hussein. And shout out, of course, to Miss Eleanor. And shout out to everybody that tunes in for the show. God bless you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Stay away from those trends.